All right, we're live, or at least we should be. Let's see here and make sure we're good on all platforms. Can you hear me all right, David?
I sure can. Can you hear me?
I can. And we should be joined by Caleb here in a moment, too. He is traveling right now, so we'll get him on here if his signal permits. But yeah, leave us a comment. Let us know where you guys are joining from. Give me a second to make sure everything's all good, and we can kind of dive in and get started here. What are you drinking today, David?
I've got, I was like so excited to start drinking. I've got this white wine. It's from Georgia, not in the US, but Georgia and Europe.
Oh, nice. Have you had it before? Is that why you're excited to drink it, or is it something new?
I haven't had this wine ever before, but now I'm just ready to drink, man.
You should have told me you're bringing wine. Wine sounds good right now. I could have done a wine session today instead, but I'm excited for mine too. So I've got some Angel's Envy, but this is the rum cask finish versus the port wine barrel, which you'll find in most stores. So this one's a little bit harder to find, but definitely not impossible. But if you guys have not tried the Angel's Envy, the rum barrels, it's really, really good. So I'd recommend trying that. I'm gonna pour myself some here right now, actually. There's one that's a little better than this called Angel's Envy Cask Strength, but that one's extremely difficult to find. If you do find it, let me know because I'd be interested in buying it from you. All right. Caleb's still not there yet, so guessing he's just in the down reception area. Good afternoon, guys. I'll be into my bourbon in about 3 hours. You know, everyone starts at different times, you know.
Yeah.
Cheers.
What time is it in Arizona right now?
It is 1:03. So technically, we're still called Mountain Time, but it's Pacific Time right now for this next 6 months of the year, or whatever it is.
Gotcha.
It's funny. You'd think it'd be easier that we don't have time change, but it's harder because we have to readjust all the meetings because our time stays the same, but no one else's times do. So as our weekly calls we do for Scout IQ stuff are at 6:30 my time instead of 7:30 like normal. So it's a little bit early, but it works out.
I thought I had a bad week having to get up by 7:30, but 6:30.
6:30s, yeah, it's a little bit more, but not terrible. Not drinking in the car ride line, probably a good idea. Someone from Las Vegas, Nevada, Springfield, Missouri. We've got Salt Lake City, Utah, Virginia. David, I'm joining from Michigan. I got the $20 from you in Miami.
Yeah.
Do you know who that Facebook user is?
Yeah, I forget his name. It escapes me right now, but I remember. I'm not even going to take a stab at it, but I do remember giving just another bookseller $20.
Billy Flips, Dave can read ? That's an Instagram handle.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about legally changing my name.
Legally change it. Where did our names go, by the way? Normally they're up here. Let me figure that out real fast.
Doug Belser. Yeah, that's him.
Show display names. Huh. Our names are gone for some reason. Oh, well. All right, let's see here. What do we got going on? So the topic of today's discussion is bulk books. And David, you're brand new to selling bulk on Amazon, right?
Yeah, it's just been a few weeks for me.
So how many months do we just figure out that you've been selling on Amazon?
I think we pinned it at right around 165 months.
165 months. Let me know in the comments if anyone beats that. If anyone's been selling on Amazon for longer than 165 months, I'm curious if anyone in here has been doing that. My Amazon account started it was 2015. I started my Amazon account, which is not even a quarter of that time that you've been selling on Amazon, I don't think. But let's see here if someone else. Yeah. You're a noob. I guess you're just a beginner at this. You got a few more months under your belt. You can get there.
Yeah, hopefully one day.
Tampa, Florida. At my job in Oakland, Florida. So we got people from all over the place here. So My idea, and David, you can correct me if you want to do something different with this, but is to talk about the process of starting a bulk business, probably coming from the standpoint of someone that's already selling online, probably cherry picking, and just going through the main steps of first, how do you find inventory? And obviously, you have to figure out the duds, and then we can start kind of breaking it down step by step from there if you're up for that. And then if Caleb joins us, we can kind of shift topic a little bit or something like that. But let us know in the comments, everyone, a question that you have for David so we can cover it while we're talking about this. And then for the giveaway today, I'll announce this right now. We're going to be doing a consultation call with David Chung. So if you guys want to start bulk, if you have a bulk business, this is a prime opportunity to get some one-on-one insight from David. So what did we say the competition was going to be, David? What do you want people to drop in the comments that we'll select from the end of this live stream?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can just drop in what has been the coolest item that you've sold? I'd like to maybe keep it around books, but just post it in the comments. If the coolest thing you've sold is a copy of Good to Great, post that in. We're not going to judge based on how cool it is, but if you'd like to enter this drawing, just go ahead and drop in the comments the coolest title, the coolest book you've ever sold. Maybe I'll start off by sharing what my coolest item was. It just happened to be one of the cooler items, and then maybe also one of the more expensive items. We sold a cookbook. It was a Hobbit cookbook, kind of like from Lord of the Rings, and it had recipes like kind of
Hobbit cookbook.
Hobbit cookbook.
What recipes? What kind of recipes were in there?
No, it's how to cook hobbits.
Well, that's a good one too.
Hobbit, fried hobbit, hobbit with carrots, barbecue hobbit. No, I don't remember the actual recipes, but the other cool thing, the reason why it stuck out was I think we got like $470 for it. And so not only was it a really cool book, but it was like, wow, I didn't really think that someone would be spending $500 to figure out how to cook hobbit.
So my most interesting item that I think I've sold on Amazon, I remember specifically finding this because I thought it was an error with Amazon saying it was worth so much money, but it was this like old paperback book with this older guy, a giant beard, looked like it was printed at home, holding a bunch of mushrooms in his hand, and it was how to grow mushrooms in your backyard, and it was at Goodwill, and I scanned it and it said it was worth like $240. And I was like, no way, someone just priced it too high. But I listed it anyways, and it sold the very next day for that amount. Some random like paperback book on how to grow mushrooms. Looks like it was printed at home almost. But I looked it up, and it's legitimate. Most of the books everyone says looks like they were printed at home. It was not some counterfeit of this book. But yeah, I did not know a book about growing mushrooms would be so valuable to people.
I could see that. I actually spoke on the phone with Max yesterday, who's I think a guest on next week's Books and Bourbon. And Max actually brought up that subject matter, growing mushrooms.
Really?
That you should always look out for in thrift stores or yard sales, library sales.
I think there's like a very dedicated subculture of people that are very into that and are willing to spend money, since there's not that many of those books, I'm sure, out there floating around, that once you find it, there's those people that are willing to spend money on that. Caleb, what's the most interesting thing you've sold on Amazon?
The most interesting thing that Amazon thinks I've sold are when books get returned and I end up with car parts. I got a set of boxing gloves one time, and they have my, FNSKU sticker on them, so it looks like it's mine, but I've never sent any of that stuff in. In terms of actually sold, I mean, it's a little of everything. It's funny to go through and look at the expensive books that sell, and you just kind of look at some of the titles and subject matters and go, why would anybody write a book on this topic? And two, why is anybody buying it? And typically the weirder the better. That's kind of what works. But I don't have any cool mushroom stories or Hobbit. Like nothing really stands out. It was funny. I was at the day before the Kentucky Derby. It's called the Oaks. It's like the local race, so it's at Churchill Downs. I'm not really into the horse world at all, but I had a bunch of friends who went down from Indiana, and we drove down last weekend. And so we're all betting, and it's $2 bets at the horse track. And that's really the only reason to go watch horse racing. You know, it's fun, but it's really cool to see the upsets. And of course, if anybody watched the Kentucky Derby, the last place horse, the last minute entry, you know, somebody scratched the day of, that horse was like 80-1 odds and ended up winning. So it started the race in last place. The jockey expertly maneuvered its way through and ended up getting first. And one of the buddies I was with threw like $5 on that horse because it had the best odds and won, you know, 400. So, you know, that's about as good as it gets. I like to think that what we're doing with books, and this sounds cheesy, but a little bit of what we're doing is kind of buying lottery tickets. We invest in long tail books. You buy a book for $1 or $2, and sometimes they're 80-1 odds. The E-score is 0, the rank's 6 million. There's not a great chance that it sells, but if it does, you might get, you know, $200 for the headache. So it's kind of fun to see, you know, how those things play out. But unlike the lottery, in terms of, you know, this is getting off the beaten path a little bit, but unlike when you're gambling $2 at a time, you know, I started with $10 that day. I got up to like 37 at one point. Like, man, I'm pretty good at picking horses. And, you know, the more you trade stocks, the more you lose typically. And the more you gamble, the more you lose. And at some point you get cocky and you think you're doing well, and you decide to throw, you know, $20, half your pie on one horse. And of course it doesn't work out. And then you're like, well, I'm going to get it back. And you bet the remaining bit. So pretty soon my $10 turned to 0. So the benefit of doing like a business is the longer you invest in it, the longer you've been in it. And we'll talk about how old David is later here in a second. But the longer you've been in it, the more that it actually compounds on itself. And it's not, you know, you're not really gambling. You're actually learning. You're making mistakes. You're failing forward, so to speak. And over time, you can kind of compound and build on that success instead of just taking bigger and bigger risks. You know, you're taking more and more calculated risks. So that's my soapbox. I don't have any particular books that stand out in terms of what I've sold recently, but I did sell a $300 book. I need to look up what it was. But while I was at the pre-derby and trying to, you know, turn my $10 into whatever I could, I sold a book that I paid $2 for $300. So that was kind of the reminder of, hey, you know, you can try and gamble, or you can actually just, you know, invest and realistically invest in your business and buy inventory.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy. Shane Hill says he sold one for $799.99. That was the 7.9 million rank, and it sold overnight, which is a pretty random thing to happen there. Let's see what else we've got here.
Well, he may have been the only offer, and somebody had an alert set and was just, you know, trying to find that book, and as soon as it listed, they snagged it.
Probably, especially for that sales rank. First ever sale was a book on making fermented sausages. I've sold nothing yet, just getting started. That's good too. That means all your interesting sales are ahead of you. Riches are in the niches, as they say. Very true. We're going to have some good things. So all throughout this video, post the things that you guys find interesting. We'll take a random number at the end, like we've been doing the last few episodes, and then pull a winner to have a consultation with David here. Caleb, did you want to kick us off with any specific topic, or do you just want to start with bulk books in general and David's story?
No, we'll kick it off. I'm sorry for being late. I'm kind of in the middle of central Indiana, so hopefully the internet holds on for us, and if not, you know, I trust you guys are in good hands. This is session number 3 of Books and Bourbon. Unfortunately, as you can tell, I'm driving, so I have an Air Bourbon. It's Michael Jordan's brand. It's very, very good, extremely rare, and oddly enough, not that expensive. So I'm going to be drinking an Air Bourbon. David and Matthew, do you guys have bourbon? Do you want to share what you're drinking real quick?
We did when we got started, but David's drinking a wine from, where was your wine from?
It's a Georgian wine.
A Georgian
country
wine.
Of, as opposed.
No, it's fresh out of Atlanta.
Oh, nice. A very, very popular wine region.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've just got the Angel's Envy with the rum cask version of it.
Oh, is that the green bottle?
It is the green bottle, one of my favorite ones.
Oh man, I just discovered that at the Derby. Actually, somebody had a bottle. It was so
really?
Good.
I love this.
Yeah.
It's so much different than the port wine one you find in all the different stores. It's really, really good.
Yeah, it's we'll save some of that for next time I visit. Don't drink it.
I will. I did find some one last bottle of Buffalo Trace recently. You said that one went allocated, didn't it?
It's been rumored to be going, and most of the restaurants here in Indiana, I'm friends with some of the, it's a small town, so you kind of know everybody. And most of the local bars and restaurants, Buffalo Trace is their well bourbon. So if you just order a standard cocktail, that's what's in it. You can find it in stores for 25, 26 bucks.
Yeah.
It's not that expensive. And they've been rumored to be going allocated. And my buddy Brett, who's a bartender, just confirmed last week. He said they went to order more and were told you can't get it. And so I don't know what they're going to do.
Well, I'm not sure.
But everybody's going.
I'm not sure if it's just random or not, but you told me that last week, and I was like, oh, I should buy some before people figure it out. And the 2 stores I went to were completely sold out. I was like, oh no, people already figured out it was happening. And then one store, it was like a Walmart. I found one single bottle hidden behind another bottle of something else. And so I snagged that one. And so it's the only one I've seen out in the wild of 3 or 4 stores I've been to.
Well, it's all over Indiana still, or it used to be. I'm guessing it's going to get snatched up quickly as well. So
nice.
We shall see. Well, this is week number 3. I'm gonna bow out in a little bit. I'll be watching from the sidelines, but I wanted to kick things off. I've been down in Cincinnati for 2 days. There's a good friend of mine I've met playing golf. He's actually a professional golfer, but in the very early stages of his career. So he's not on the PGA Tour, and I got to go watch him play a round and a half out of 3 that he's playing in Cincinnati. So, Nick, if you ever watch this stuff, it was a pleasure being with you and watching you. And I love when people are pursuing their dreams. And golf is a very difficult career to get into. And Nick's a University of Michigan grad. I'm a Michigan State fan, so that was very difficult for me to cheer him on. But Nick's a good dude, and that was really cool just to kind of see him pursuing his dreams over in Cincinnati. So I am driving back from that currently. And last week, for those that jumped on, we interviewed Alisa. She's brand new. She was about 5 weeks into her Amazon journey. So for those of you that are brand new to the journey, or in your first month or first couple months, go back and check that one out. It's a really good training. We kind of talked about some of her fears, how she got started, some of the things she's learning, and she's sharing her journey as well. So that's a really good episode. Check that one out. And then we're going to the other end of the spectrum. We talked about pendulums last week. So we've had Alisa on one side. Now we got David all the way on the other. Alisa's 1 month in. I think David's about 165 months into his journey. And so he's going to be sharing the other end of the spectrum. And kind of what we're going to be settling in every week here is there's really only 2 ways to improve your business. One is to get better sources and find more books, because that's really the main skill that all of us need to have. And the second is efficiency. And David is, I really look up to him in terms of his efficiency. He's really good at running a warehouse. He's also pretty darn good at tracking down books, so much so that I had to move out of Denver. So he kind of cornered the market there. Well, there were other reasons in play, but David's really sharp. We're looking forward to kind of picking at his story and hearing where he came from. And over the next couple of weeks, we'll be getting into more strategies for scaling up, because at the end of the day, if we all find a pile of books, we kind of have the same superpower in that we know how to turn those into money. And so it really just becomes a matter of who can find more books and who's really good at it. So we'll be sharing tips in terms of how to find more books, how to get lucky more often, if you want to call it that. And we'll be talking about how to scale up, whether you want to hire, build a scout team. Sorry, I'm getting off track here with my navigation. But whether you want to build a scout team, if you want to do consignment like my business, or if you want to get into bulk like what David's doing. So we hope you enjoy, as Tim Ferriss says, this wide-ranging discussion. And I'll be kind of watching from the sidelines as you share your story as well, Dave.
All right. Well, thanks for that introduction.
Yeah.
For those of you guys who haven't heard about my journey or don't know who I am, I'd like to just give you a quick overview. My name is Dave. I've been selling books now for the better part of 14 years, and started when I was 18 years old. And so that puts me still at a relatively young age, I'd like to think. Started selling books by, kind of started buying bulk, but didn't know it was called bulk back then. Moved more to a cherry picking operation, hired some friends and family and expanded, moved into a warehouse pretty early on, continued to expand. And then we've been fortunate enough to find a lot of success in running a bulk operation out of Colorado. And so that's what I've been doing for the better part of 7 years now, which is buying books by the truckload, sorting through them. We have about 20 employees, full-time employees right now working at the company, and we're in about 20,000 square feet, selling kind of all over the place, but roughly about $250,000 to 350,000 books every year.
Those are some impressive numbers.
Thank you.
How long after you started selling did you move into the warehouse? You said it was pretty soon after, but how quickly, I'm just curious, did you get your first warehouse after you started selling on Amazon?
Yeah. So I started back in 2008. We moved into our first warehouse 3 years after that, 2011. I think I mentioned this in the last video, but it was at the peak of the recession, and I think I got into, it was like 5,000 or 6,000 square feet, and we were paying $1,300 a month for it. It leaked like crazy. It barely had any lights. It had a half a working bathroom, but it was the right price.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't find those prices anymore at all.
It's 5,000 square feet nowadays. Like if you're in any sort of populated area, it almost seems like you have to pay about $5,000-6,000 for that space nowadays. It's crazy.
At least that's what prices are out here too, or maybe a little bit less than that right now. But when I've looked at different spaces, not only are there very few to choose from in that size range, but the ones that are extremely expensive. It was interesting though, because I had a small warehouse space out here in Arizona for a little bit, and there was so many different unique businesses that are all occupying these small warehouses. It's so cool just to drive through some of those small warehouse sections and see all the unique businesses that are operating in there. There's a few different retail arbitrage people operating out of there. There's like a motorcycle shop on one side of me and a woodworking shop on the other that made these custom dog crates. And it was really cool to see all the different businesses you'll really start to see if you go to those small warehouses. Some cool neighbors you can get if you're moving into a small warehouse like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting too, just kind of riffing off that. It's really interesting to see sort of how business is so cyclical. And for a while there, retail space, we had a brick and mortar bookstore for a number of years in the early 2010s. And we kind of got squeezed out of retail because retail, started getting more and more popular, and it was getting really heated kind of near the tail end of the recession. And so we kind of got squeezed out of our retail space. And here we are in 2020, 2021, and retail's been way down. And warehousing has kind of skyrocketed. And so it's really interesting to sort of see the cyclical nature of it. One of the lessons that I learned early on, so the fun fact, I've signed more commercial leases than I have residential leases. I've never actually rented. I was still living with my parents when I bought my first warehouse. And one of the things that we learned early on is just kind of hedging your bet and protecting yourself against getting squeezed out of your space, because if you don't have the space to operate, you can't run your business. And so, we made a really conscious decision early on to own the space that we operate in. And back then it was very possible to do that. Nowadays, it's you've got to start with quite a bit to do that, but it's still possible. And I'm happy to cover that maybe later on too, like some different avenues on how you can invest in real estate if that's something you're interested in.
I'm interested in that topic, as you already know. That'll be a fun discussion to have. Thanks, Scott, for the $20. Thanks for this series. Appreciate that. That'll go towards David's wine in the future, I guess. Let's see here. Pretty sure 1,300 is the closest you can get here. Someone said they're wanting $3,400 for 1,000 square feet. That is a pretty crazy price point right there. So everyone's in a similar area. San Francisco Bay Area might not even be cost effective here to get a warehouse. I could definitely see that. Except retail is not probably doing very great in the San Francisco Bay Area right now. So maybe you guys operate out of a retail store. I know that's not normally possible, but
real quick, just jumping in on that. Like 5 years ago, we were looking for a space to expand, and we eventually just moved into another industrial space, warehouse space. But there was not a strip mall, but like a shopping center, kind of like a Kmart that went out of business type of situation.
Yeah.
And I remember they wanted $8 million, $2 million for this Kmart space. It was like 80 plus thousand square feet. It was huge. It was ginormous. And I'm sure there was a development play in there somewhere, but kind of like to your point, I think there are ways to sort of reconfigure the use case to try to arbitrage, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but
Yeah.
kind of leverage what you're using it for. I've heard of people doing bulk books out of storage units, a couple of people doing it out of office spaces, like abandoned office. So a lot of different options there.
I mean, if it's on the first floor next to a door, easy to get to for a small operation, they let you. That's not a bad idea. But if you're carrying it up elevators and down elevators, it's probably a different story there.
Maybe. Absolutely.
Someone says they're operating out of 3 storage units. You never operated out of a storage unit. You went straight to a warehouse, correct?
We went straight to a warehouse. I mean, it was pretty much a giant storage unit. The landlord, it was vacant for the longest time. It was like, I swear, like every time it rained, you got about an inch or two of water on the floor. And there were a few times, like most of the time I checked the weather and it got all the books off the ground before it started raining. But there were a few times where over the weekend or just didn't check the forecast. And, there goes a week's worth of inventory, and it hurt. You learn to get organized real quick after you lose a few weeks of inventory.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah. I would assume so. Keep your books off the ground.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point, David, I think business is really a series of problem solving. And so I love talking to bulk sellers. You talk to even more than I do, just in terms of how do you get creative? Because most commercial leases now, they'll want 2 to 3 years of like some kind of a contract. And if you're trying to get your first shipment or your first Gaylord, that's a big hurdle to jump over and kind of commit to that when you have no idea if your supply will last. So maybe we can kind of riff just on a few ideas. I'll kind of mention a few. One of the best ways, like most people start with storage units because they're typically month to month. You can ramp up storage space as needed, especially if there's a lot of empty units. You could really negotiate with the owner of the space because they're not making money if nobody's renting the space. So if you want to rent 1 or 2 off on the corner that's less desirable, you don't really care as long as you can get Wi-Fi in there and of course electricity typically. But if you're able to do that, you could ramp up, and if your supply cuts way back, you could ramp down from 2 or 3 or 4 units back down to 1 with a month's notice. So you're not really locking in. The other one, and I kind of did it in Indiana, is I knew a guy that bought a warehouse, a big building. It was kind of segmented out. And I kind of approached him and said, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be doing this for a while. I had a consignment business. I didn't know if we were going to continue to ramp it up or kind of try and hold it steady. And so I was able to kind of rent like a third of his warehouse space. And he's kind of got like some old cars stored off to the side. We kind of put some cones around it so we don't hit it with the forklift. But, I was able to kind of rent that way below market rate. He's happy because now he's got somebody in there. I was able to help pay utilities and trash. And of course, I'm paying a monthly rent. It is below market, even in a small town, Indiana, but he's able to make some money with the space as well. So one really good approach, if you're able to, is find somebody that that like already owns a space. Maybe it's a school that doesn't need it in the summer. Maybe it's a church that has some extra space out back. Like if you get creative and network, a lot of people have space, maybe a third stall garage, maybe something. And if you approach them and offer to rent it and make sure you got insurance and stuff set up in case things go sideways, a lot of times you can get pretty creative.
Absolutely. Well, and I've been to your space, Caleb, and so I know like how kind of like I guess it'd be really tough for a lot of other businesses to maybe occupy that space. And one of the beautiful things about what we do is it's so flexible. I mean, whether you're doing a cherry picking operation or you're kind of doing a smaller bulk operation, one of the cool things about this business is that just sort of the versatility and being able to, almost take, like you said, people are operating out of storage units, people are operating out of huge warehouses. I've heard of people operating out of their garage or a shed attached to their house, and so and like processing good volume out of that. And so, to your point, Caleb, like don't get stuck in thinking that it has to have a dock and it has to, dock helps for sure, but it doesn't need to have a dock. It doesn't need to have a working bathroom. I mean, you could really figure out a lot of different ways to make the space work,
For sure. And you're obviously way more an expert there, but in terms of like, if you want to call it warehouse hacking, some of the cost drivers, if you're going to be shipping in pallets or truckloads, a lot of times truckloads won't have a lift gate. That's not even an option. And if you need it, even on LTL or a single pallet, a lift gate can cost a fair amount of money. And typically when you send a shipment out through Amazon, if you do a pallet, there's no option to even book with a lift gate. You have to call the carrier and add it in. And typically, I guess Amazon absorbs it. I've never seen a bill for it. But what you can get is our space doesn't have a dock. We don't have a forklift. They're pretty expensive and it takes up a lot of room in the warehouse. We have something called a pallet walker, pallet straddler, and it's battery operated. It actually is very, very small in the grand scheme of things. You can actually just push it under a Gaylord of books and it hardly sticks out very far. And we were able to take that and it lifts all the way up. It's incredibly powerful. And you can pull a 1,500 pound Gaylord or a pallet of books off a semi truck and put it back at ground level. So it's kind of a poor man's forklift, if you will. And that's a really good way if you're in a storage unit, if you're in a small environment. Lift gates can be difficult. Sometimes it's hard to get a truck with a lift gate back into a limited access area. And if you have access to something like that, that can be a game changer as well without ponying up money and getting something with a dock.
Absolutely. So I've had a walkie stacker. I called them walkie stackers, but pallet straddler, I had one too. And the cool thing about that, or like if you're on kind of like the fence, you're like, should I invest in a forklift? Should I invest in a walkie stacker? I'll tell you this: I've never ever bought a forklift for. Let me figure out how to phrase this. I've always made money on the forklifts, and I've bought them and used them and sold them a few times, and it's just like forklifts and walkie stackers or pallet straddlers. Those are items that every business needs, kind of universally, and so there's always demand for it, and it almost always seems like the price is increasing on it. And so, like, if I could think back to like what are some of the things that if I started from day one that I'd invest in right away, is absolutely equipment that helps me move around the pallets of books easier. If it's a forklift, pallet straddler, or even electric pallet jack, I mean, all those things, you're not going to lose money on it. At least that's been my experience. Yeah,
I agree there. So those are all great things in terms of efficiency. Well, I know one of the big questions people are going to have is, and one of the things you do well, let's talk a little bit about people. And then also kind of course, the big question everybody wants to have is, where do you get your books? So let's kind of dive into those two topics, and I'll keep my mouth shut here. I'm going to be jumping off here soon anyway, but those are kind of probably the two big drivers that you could probably shed a lot of light on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like one of the most frequent questions that I get is, when is it right to hire your first employee? And to be honest, it varies from business to business, but I'll say, like, this is my own personal take, but my opinion is that you should hire your first employee as soon as possible. And kind of tying this back to what we were talking about with real estate and the space that you occupy, your first employee doesn't have to look like a traditional employee. My first employee was my sister, who was in middle school at the time, and I had her help me out after school, pick a few items. And I think a lot of people, work with family to kind of bridge that gap between being a solopreneur to hiring employees. But, as you hear many people saying, don't hire friends or family. But my argument is, take the chance. And one of the things that you can do is like, when I've hired friends in the past, if you're not sure if it's going to work out or not, one of the cool things that you can do is you can talk to your friend and you say, hey Joe, I actually have a friend named Joe, and I wasn't sure if it was going to work out. And I said, hey Joe, hey, I need some help, but I think I only need help for about a month. Is that okay with you? And he agreed to that, and he agreed to how much I'd be paying him. And I worked with Joe for about a month. And at that point, if it didn't work out with Joe, I could say, well, hey, Joe, thank you so much for all your help. I think that's good. Good luck with whatever you're doing, and kind of send him on his way. but ended up being where like Joe was awesome. He like helped me grow my business quite a lot in that 1 month period. And so that's when I approached Joe and I said, "Hey, Joe, I know we talked about only working together for a month, but would you be able to stick around for a few more months? You really helped me out this last month." And it's sort of kind of like a non-committal way of being able to work with friends and family without like kind of having that. Do you guys kind of get what I'm saying, Matthew?
Setting up those boundaries when the relationship starts, basically expectations. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, now I know how you why you approached me a certain way when we first met.
Exactly. Oh man. Yeah. Well, so that's one of the things I do. We actually, so when I remember when I first hired my first employee, and I'll explain why I put this quotation marks. His name was Corey. I hired Corey back in 2010. And I actually hired him through a temp agency. And so I went through a temp agency, and I think I was paying the temp agency like $15 at the time, and Corey was getting maybe $11, maybe less. But that's another easy way to go about hiring your first employee, because you don't have to jump through all the hurdles of getting workers comp, unemployment insurance, every state has different requirements. And so if you don't really want to mess with that, working with a temp agency, you are going to pay that premium. You are going to pay the temp agency a little bit more than if you hired the employee directly. But it's also another way where you can kind of baby steps, right? Training wheels. And so working with temp agencies, that's how I hired my first employee. And then soon after that, I hired on a few more kind of friends of friends. And those were some of the first W-2 employees that I had. And again, the whole thing, it's just kind of trial by error. And I have not been a perfect manager or a perfect employer by any means. But, as far as bridging that gap between, again, just being a solo entrepreneur to having people actually help you out with your process, there are a lot of little baby steps that you can take to make that, to bridge that gap.
How big of a hurdle was that to do W-2 employment? I know a lot of people just want to do a 1099. They think that's what most people probably do. You chose to do W-2. What kind of was in your decision making to do W-2 over just hiring as a contractor?
Yeah, there are some more qualified people that could answer this, but I feel like I know what I'm talking about when I say this. Depending on the state, but generally speaking, independent contractors, 1099 employees, they have there's a very specific definition. Oftentimes they have to be able to set their own schedule, use their own equipment. So they truly are an independent contractor. And you can get in trouble if you misclassify employees, because of course you're not paying all the taxes you might if they were an employee on your actual payroll. So I did actually have some 1099 employees, and in full transparency, they were my parents, and they were going out scouting for books for me, and I put them on as independent contractors. They were driving their own car, they were using their own handheld scanners, paying for their own gas, and I was just paying them every month to scout for books, cherry picking for me. So I did have my fair share of 1099 kind of experience. When I made the transition to W-2, man, I don't want to self-incriminate myself, but like, for example, I didn't realize like you needed workers' comp. Like I thought that was like a state thing that like they provided for you as part of the taxes and everything. And so for like the first couple of years, I operated without any workers' comp, which is like scary. It's terrifying. Like if someone hurt themselves, oh my God, I'd probably be behind bars right now. But, okay, so if you want to hire your employee, here's some kind of universal things you absolutely do need. You need workers' comp. You need to make sure that you're filing all the federal and state employment taxes. Federally, I think it's Form 941, and you're paying quarterly or annual taxes on the payroll that you're paying. I recommend Gusto. I've got a referral code where we both make a little bit of money if you guys are looking for a payroll processor. I recommend Gusto. I've used Paychecks in the past, and I know some of my friends who use ADP. All those are great options. And when you work with ADP, Paychecks, or Gusto, a lot of times they do have things sort of set up in a way where it walks you through the process as far as what you need. Like, they're not going to let you operate and hire people without making sure that everything is done first. So that's what I would say. If you want to hire your first employee and put them on payroll, work with a payroll provider, because oftentimes they have people devoted to making sure that you're not doing anything illegal. I just so happen to fall through the cracks on the workers' comp piece. I don't know how that slipped by me.
That's funny. Everyone's got a story. There's so many rules and regulations that go into just taxes in general, much less having employees. And I think everyone's accidentally broken hundreds of laws at different points in time throughout operating any small business. I know I've made mistakes in the past as far as organizing the business goes. Would you say, I've always been curious, do you think you get a different type of employee when you're hiring a W-2 employee versus a 1099 employee, someone that's going into it with the expectation of, I'm a self-contractor, I've got my own business, I'm just working with them, versus I work for this person, I'm their employee? Do you think that has a different mindset, or do you think it's the same either way? It's just a better way to go about it if it's the legal definition of what the worker's doing?
Yeah. My honest take is I think most people, like most employees, don't know the difference. If an employee said, hey, I've got a job for you, we're going to consider you an independent contractor, you're not going to get a W-2, you're getting this form called 1099. They're like, all right, well, how much am I making, and when can I get started? Yeah. I think most people are just kind of like, like even most business owners are kind of clueless when it comes down to like what is an independent contractor versus a W-2 employee. I think most people who are looking for employment won't know the difference. That being said, I have seen cases where, people who are specifically looking for 1099 employment, they tend to be, from my experience, more free-spirited. They are looking for something that's a little bit more flexible. Yeah. But generally speaking, I think most people are just kind of like, indifferent.
Yeah. So someone asked, so would you pay them per book or hourly when you're hiring an employee for a bulk operation?
I just paid them per month. So it wasn't even hourly. Granted, it was my parents. And so I couldn't sit there and say, hey, you only worked 40 hours this month. I'm going to have to cut your paycheck. But that being said, I paid them based on time period. I know, I think it was actually Reezy Resells. He and I were talking a few years back, and I think he had some sort of per piece rate worked out. And I know he was crushing it in cherry picking for a while too. And so I think I did it, per month, but I think people can find success based on the situation either way.
And now all your employees are just hourly or salary, right?
Right. Yeah. So I have, like 20 full-time employees. I do have, I hired my first virtual assistant to help with some graphic design work. Nice. And she is a contractor, but everyone else is a W-2 employee.
Nice. So we've talked about warehouse space a little bit, that some people can get started with storage units, or some people have even said they have storage units right now. Someone's cherry picking, they're doing it maybe as their full-time job, they want to get into bulk. The first question I think everyone has is, where do I find that many books? Someone said a little bit earlier on in the comments, they're like, how do I get to the point that I need more space? Which is a good question. How do you get the quantity of books you're talking about to be able to have 20 employees and stuff like that? Where do you start going about that process of finding books in bulk?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I should preface by saying, I think Caleb loves talking about this. And I'm totally going to butcher it, but he said something like, you should really ask yourself, what are you looking for? Is it more? Because sometimes more is just more. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you have to really analyze your situation and ask yourself, is is doing what I'm doing times 10, is that going to solve my issues or my problems, or is that going to get me to where I want to go? And sometimes the answer is yes, but other times the answer is no or maybe, right?
Yeah.
But okay, so jumping into it, how do you get more books? So in our case, I was cherry picking, and this was before like man, this was like right after the advent of smartphones, like kind of like back then we were using PDAs. I don't know if you were ever around.
Yeah.
There,
I
we
had a
used
PDA.
pallets,
Yeah.
pallets. But that being said, competition, like back then, competition was growing. Now it's super competitive, but back then, like it was just me and a few other booksellers, like 2, 3 other booksellers, and that started to change. And so that's when I said, hey, you know what? I need a shift from a cherry picking model to maybe something a little bit less competitive, maybe something more resilient. And so that's when I started looking at bulk and purchasing books in bulk. Now, where do you find this volume? Honestly, it sort of appears in all different places. And I've had so many conversations about this. But example that I have right now is yesterday I went to a networking event for a bookstore. And they sell new books primarily, but they also accept donations of used books so they can give them out to families that can't afford new books in their bookstore. And I went to this networking event, and because we work with them, we work with a new bookstore, uh, and we take all the used books that the families don't want,
Mm.
and we take all the used books, and it ends up being only about 600, 700 books a week, which is a small volume for us. But um, that's one way that you can kind of look. It's just kind of like you just kind of follow the breadcrumbs, figure out where are used books being funneled. You know, Goodwill and Salvation Army and Savers, thrift stores, the big thrift stores. That's just one channel. I mean, there are infinite channels. I mean, one of the things that I do all the time is like in my area, I kind of take book the book owner's perspective. I like to take other people's perspective, and I'll go to Google myself and pretend like I'm trying to get rid of a big collection. So I'll go into
Yeah.
Google, I'll type in where to donate books or whatever, and I'll see a list of all these organizations that accept books, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to call every single one of these. Hey, I know you accept books. Or is there ever a moment or instance where you have too many books?
Yeah.
And every single time they're like, yeah, we have too many books. And I say, oh, what's your current solution? And usually they work with another book vendor, or if you're really lucky, they say, oh, we just toss them in the recycling bin. You say, well, I'd love to work with you and keep the books in circulation outside of the recycling bins. And yeah, I mean, so just follow the breadcrumbs is what I'd say. I don't want to sit here and say, hey, you should contact Goodwill and this organization, because it's not the same. I mean, every region is so different. Every case is so isolated, and so you really have to follow your breadcrumbs in your specific case.
Yeah. Um, a few questions. One of the things I've heard people talk about before is, are there brokers for used books? Does that exist? And also, everyone kind of always pops up here and there. Is donation bins a viable thing to do for a business? Everyone sees it all the time for clothing and shoes and stuff like that. Every once in a great while, you see them for books. Is that something you ever considered? And kind of what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Remind me the first part of the
The
question.
broker, are there brokers that help with used books?
Yeah, so I've been brokering a few loads myself, actually, and so if you're looking for some books, hit me up, because I may have some excess supply in your area. I'm happy to send to you. So there are brokers out there. I'm not the only one. There are a lot of brokers out there. I think the tough thing is you run into the same issue, and I'll kind of touch on it because it's so important, and which is vetting your supply, right? So just kind of like if you were a cherry picking operation, you went to a thrift store and every day you'd scan, you walk out with 2 books after 2 hours. that's not that great. You're not spending your time wisely. But here's the thing: it's like with cherry picking, pretty quickly, like, hey, is this source or this supply worth my time? With bulk, it's a little bit confusing. You scan through thousands and thousands of books, and you don't really know until you process a truckload or two or three if the supply is worth what you're paying for. And so
Yeah.
I'd say, yes, there are brokers out there. There's so many brokers out there. You just Google where to buy books in bulk, and you'll find brokers. But I would just say be very, very careful, because I know in one case, a few colleagues actually that have been burned by supply that I've purchased from in the past. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I knew that was junky supply. They overcharge and they pull out everything that's good. And I've seen people lose thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars on bad supply, because again, they just assume that, oh, it's bulk books, I can just buy it and make money on it. As far as donation bins go, kind of the breadcrumbs thing too. It depends on your area, but I have seen, I know Better World Books, Discover Books, a couple of these big book selling operations that do really awesome with donation bins. And then I know there have been a few huge donation bin operations, specifically out east, that had hundreds, if not thousands of bins, and folded up shop. So really, and
so kind of along the same lines, but a little bit different, because I see this pop up also in the groups every once in a while, is people getting scammed trying to get into bulk books, not knowing the game very well, and asking if $500 is a good price for a gaylord of used books. So like, what pricing should people kind of expect if they're wanting to go buy a gaylord of used books, just in a range? I know there's a range of prices here, everywhere from free to a little bit higher up there, but $500 would be excessive. Someone really asked that a little while ago for a just random unsorted gaylord of books. What would your guidance be on kind of what you should expect to pay when you're buying in bulk?
Yeah, absolutely. So like the price point that my company purchases at, it's price point that's probably like, we're paying a lot more for books than the average person. And a lot of that is trying to keep relationships, trying to keep certain suppliers in our funnel to make sure that we have enough supply during the dry months. And so, man, it ranges all over the place. But I think 500 is definitely on the higher end. I would rarely spend that much on a random unsorted pallet. But I've had suppliers reach out to me and they say, hey, David, I've got 10 pallets of textbooks that, we were going to sell in our sale, but we never got around to it. Would you be open to paying us $6,000 for these 10 pallets of textbooks? And I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And did really well on those. And that was, what is that, $600 a pallet.
And you knew that supplier and had a relationship, which gave you some trust, I'm sure, in making that transaction.
100%. If it was a random call out of the blue, I would be like, dude, get out of here. But that being said, I mean, I think that's kind of the importance of building relationships and building a network. And, before I take on any new supply, like one of the first things I do is call up all the sellers I know around that area. It's like, hey, have you purchased from this person before? And it's such an industry built on reputation and trust. And man, that it's super vital.
Yeah. Sounds like a painful lesson. I think they're talking about someone else that said the first pallet they bought was 1,000, had no idea what I was doing in the beginning. Everyone, I think, goes through that stage, where hopefully this training will be helpful for those of you that want to get into bulk and don't have any idea how to start it yet, because it is it's not as clear cut as cherry picking, because you can find videos all over YouTube on cherry picking. It's kind of more slim pickings when you're trying to figure out how to start a bulk operation. So where do you want to go from here, David? So we talked a little bit about warehouse space, talked a little bit about books, a little bit about employees. How do you get better shipping rates? Because people are going to figure that out once they get started, that shipping rates can be a hindrance to how much profitability they'll have in their business at the end of the day what's your kind of guidance on starting to kind of negotiate those shipping rates if you are doing merchant fulfilled, or even sending? Amazon's different if you're sending FBA, but if you're doing the merchant fulfilled route.
Yeah, absolutely. So like one of the interesting things is I feel like I have pretty good shipping rates. We ship a lot of volume. But on the Facebook groups, I've noticed a few times people have been posting Amazon's new rates with UPS for books. And sometimes people like post rates. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe UPS is beating the post office." And then they'll post the rates, and my jaw drops because like those rates are almost as good as mine, if not better. Sometimes I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, I have to like ship thousands of books in order." Like, so the company that I work with, the rates are based on how much you spend with them, and spend in any given year about $500,000 with these guys. And we're by no means the largest, but spending $500,000 in postage every year gets you certain perks. Spending $1 million, $2 million, $5 million again gets you lower rates. And so it's all about spend. And then I see, like someone who just started and they're like shipping a merchant fulfilled item, and they're getting rates. They've sold 20 items in their entire account history, and they're getting those same rates, if not better, sometimes. And so I don't think I can actually answer this, because I think Amazon is sort of changing the game and the rules of the game again, where I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 6 months that sort of became more of a consistent thing where, I mean, I guess it's to Amazon's advantage to try to secure the lowest rates possible so people can sell items for cheaper,
Yeah, so it's a good way Amazon's changing things up and mixing up the game in some ways. Well, a little bit takes away some competitive advantage from other
It's not
sellers.
good for me.
Yeah, exactly. Good for newer sellers. Takes away some of that competitive edge for sellers that have been getting the game and have the volume like you do.
Ultimately, it's good for customers, right? That's who it ends up benefiting. So,
Flips for Miles said he wants Caleb Roth for president.
who doesn't?
It's a bold statement there. I bet Caleb would agree. I don't know if he has any plans on running. We'll have to talk to him about it.
Roth Osborne, 2026.
Roth Chung would probably be more like it.
No, I'll just be, or 2024, but I'll be the Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, nice. I'm looking through some questions here and seeing what questions people have. Drop your questions in. We'll kind of answer some of these questions as I see them pop up here. What do you want to discuss? What things do you hear asked most often that we haven't covered yet when people are wanting to start getting into bulk?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just pull up here. Hold on one second. So, tools required. So, I mean, rightfully so. There's a book flipper logo right there. And so I think the tools that you use as you continue to scale up, any efficiencies that you're able to find in your process starts to add up. And so, one of the things that I typically like to recommend is making sure that you have the right tools in place. Previously, I was just talking about making sure that you're investing in the right equipment, forklifts, pallet jacks, especially electric pallet jacks, walkie stackers, but also making sure that you have the right tools for processing, like software tools. And we use a lot of different software tools, but a few of the ones that I would recommend. So we use a program called Desktop Shipper in processing a lot of our shipments. We don't go through Amazon's portal for shipping our items. We use a shipping rate shopper. And so Desktop Shipper, we use that. It's very similar to Pirate Ship or ShipStation. We also use a number of different tools. We use Pallet IQ to scan through our inventory. And for the longest time, we were using Scout IQ, and we had guys with little iPod touches attached to their forearm. Well, I guess this would be your bicep area, and using the little ring scanner, scanning through all the inventory, and they would listen for the cue from Scout IQ. But again, just making sure that the tools that you use fit the application. And so what you're using to scan, what you're using to ship, what you're using to build your FBA shipments, what you're using to build out your merchant fulfilled inventory. I think those are really important. Matthew, I wanted to quickly circle back. One of the first things we talked about was like some different ways that you can invest in real estate if you own and operate your business. Like, I'm a very vocal advocate for owning the real estate that you're in as you operate, especially in the bulk book space. I think it's instrumental in wealth creation, especially for a low margin business like we're in, especially for bulk books. But one of the cool things is the SBA offers business loans for businesses that have a few years of financials and are making money. You're able to move into spaces, occupy spaces that you'll be using for your business for as little as 10% down. And it's huge. The other thing that is really cool about that is how much cash flow is required in order to qualify for different spaces. Like Matthew, you just bought a house in the last couple of years. When you're trying to apply for financing in for a residential house, a single family home or whatever, banks typically look for a certain percentage. Typically, they try to make sure that the house isn't above 35 to 40% of your monthly income. When you're looking at commercial, it's a little bit different. They're looking at your overall revenue, which oftentimes is a lot bigger than your net. And I had the percentage. It escapes me now, but I think it's something closer to like they're really only looking for a fraction. I think it's like half or less. So like 15%, 10% of total gross revenue. Yeah, in order to qualify for your space. And so if, let's say you're doing $1 million, you could qualify for and you're only making $20,000-$30,000, you could still qualify for a space that's maybe $150,000 $200,000. And no, that math doesn't work out because
that's percentage. That's the debt to income you're talking about for the actual payment, not the value of the property, but it would affect the value you're able to buy.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, I don't know the exact percentages, but what I'm trying to say is maybe it doesn't make sense in this exact financial climate, but when it's favorable and when it's the right time, you're able to lever up more through your business than through your personal residence. And, like that's been huge for me. Scott Taylor asked, Dave, are you in the book business or the real estate business? Fun fact, I've made more money in, the real estate that my business is sitting on in the last 5 years than the book business itself.
It's the McDonald's approach. They're not in the hamburger business. They're in the real estate business.
Yeah. Have you seen The Founder of the movie?
I have. I actually haven't watched it for a long time. I watched it once, but it was a really, really well-made movie, I thought it covered it really, really well. That story. I don't know if it makes you like him a lot by the end of it, but it covers the story, I think, really well, and just his thought process. Did you take it you've watched that?
Yeah, I love that movie. I've seen it a few times, and like it really hit home for me when he said that quote, or in that movie, it was like what Ray didn't realize was he's in the real estate business. He's not in the hamburger business. You're not going to make money selling 15-cent hamburgers. You're not going to build a fortune selling books at $4 or $5 a book. It really isn't until you start levering up on appreciation and real estate. Again, your mileage may vary in today's climate, and I know real estate,
or where you're located. There's a lot of different variables there, but I think it's important that you bring that up though, because I think most people, especially maybe even in the bulk business, don't realize they even have that as an option, and that those things like the Small Business Administration does have programs for businesses. And then it's a lot easier, like you even telling me when I was asking you questions a while ago, it's a lot easier to own a space if you're going to be operating out of that space, operating your business, than trying to buy a warehouse as an investment property. There's very different standards you're judged by. Exactly. So a lot of people that are maybe even doing bulk right now is something you should consider, and just weigh the options in your area and see what it would actually take to get into a space, because depending on where you are, it might be an advantageous thing for you to do for your business and just for your wealth in the future.
Absolutely.
Going through some comments here and seeing if anything stands out.
Absolutely.
Do you have a minimum profit per book threshold?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my minimum profit per book, gosh, we try to for us, we try to make enough to cover what our overhead is per month plus 30%. That's just kind of a buffer. That's our minimum profit. But that being said, occasionally we'll sell items at break even, or even we'll take a 20-30 cent haircut on a sale because it costs less to actually make the transaction, have someone pick the book and sell it, than for us to remove it from our inventory and then try to get rid of it. So um, ideally our target is covering our overhead plus 30%. That's our minimum profit, but we go as low as break even.
Yeah. One topic I noticed we didn't cover at all. We'd mentioned at the beginning, we didn't cover it. How do you get rid of all the books that you get in bulk that you do not sell online? Oh, getting rid of duds is one of the major hurdles people have to overcome as well. What kind of steps can people take to make a plan for that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of tough right now because of the supply chain issues, but whenever your local grocery store or hardware store has a ton of lighter fluid, I mean, that's when to stock up and then spray it all over the
Go out
books.
to a forest somewhere.
Exactly. And that's where real estate really helps too, just have the real estate to burn the books without people protesting. But in all seriousness, we work with recyclers and we work with a number of other like we work with some bookstores that are looking for books actually, and we're able to sell our books. So we're able to buy them for a few cents or whatever, and we're able to sell them to these bookstores at $1, $2, because they're going to resell it for 6 to 12 presumably. And so, but you can't get rid of all your books like that. Most of the time, you're just going to have to work with a recycler.
So finding recyclers in the area and making those relationships like we were kind of talking about earlier is probably a good bet for people wanting to get started with this. You don't have to answer this if this is too personal, but someone asked, I'm curious if you have insight on this. Did you ever have to do a personal guarantee when you did a loan at first? Would it bankrupt you if the business went under? I'm sure that's a thing people have thought about, is if you have a personal guarantee on something like that, the business is never 100% guaranteed type thing.
Yeah. So when I first was closing on our first commercial space, I was 20. I was in my early 20s, and
Yeah.
I was still living with my parents. And I remember like going through all the loan docs. They make you fill out a personal financial sheet. They have you calculate a pro forma financial. Like they make you jump through all the. I had to write a resume. I'd never written a resume in my life. I had to write a resume to get
Really?
this from.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So they make you write a resume and all this. And one of the last contingencies that the bank had, it was through Wells Fargo, their SBA department. And one of the last things that they wanted is like, all right, well, I think we're ready to underwrite this loan. We're all good. But David, you're going to need to take out a life insurance policy for this. I forget exactly how much, but they wanted a life insurance. It was like $500,000 life insurance policy just in case I died. And it was like, honestly, like one of the most like spookiest things. Like you're in your early 20s, you're not even thinking about the next week, but they wanted you to take out a life insurance policy just in case you died. And so, all right, that aside, they do have personal guarantees on SBA loans, after a certain amount. To answer Scott's question?
Yeah, it was Scott.
Yeah. So to answer Scott's question, fortunately, I'm in a position now with our space that we're in, where we got in at a low enough cost basis where we could easily, flip the space, and financially we'd be hopefully sound.
Scott asked again, did you start out with the recycler for duds when you first began doing bulk?
No, I'm trying to think. Like, I think when we first started doing bulk, it was like, dude, you guys are going to laugh. So I'd buy the books from Goodwill, and then if I couldn't use them, I would literally just drop them back off at Goodwill. It sounds so dumb at this time because I'm pretty sure I bought my trash again, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And so like whoever's watching this live, like I'm sharing with you guys what I've learned. And like I've made so many mistakes over these last 14 years, and like you're getting kind of the Cliff Notes version. I am so envious. I don't know if I ever told you, Matthew, but Caleb and I met back in 2018. It was August or September 2018, and before I met Caleb and before I like got connected with him, I did not. I swear to God, I did not realize there was even a community for bookseller. Like I didn't know it existed. Like everything that I learned that I was doing, I learned from myself and just again trial by error. So I'm kind of envious because like I made dumb mistakes like buying books from the Goodwill at like 12, 15 cents a pound, which is like $150 a pallet, which is kind of a lot. And then dropping it off and then buying my own trash again at 15 cents a pound.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So this is a good question. A few more last, and we've already been going for a little while, so maybe one or two more. But Michael Kreider says, what was the last significant change you made to your workflow?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say, like, Mike Kreider always coming in with like the solid
thought out questions.
I always appreciate that. And Michael, if you're ever out in Denver, or if I'm ever out in, I think you're in SoCal, like let's link up. I'd love to buy you a drink and just talk shop with you. But so the last significant change that I made to my workflow, it's probably going to go way over the heads of a lot of people here, but we have a process built out for inbound leads for people who are interested in selling us books and just giving us books. And so one of the big changes that I made was I literally made this change like 2 weeks ago. I got this is going to sound so crazy. The manager for my transportation department being the one receiving those leads as opposed to them going into the warehouse, because it kind of cut out a middleman. Like now transportation can kind of figure out what the transportation load looks like.
Yeah.
And then, bring the books in a lot faster than having to go to the warehousing, checking, and with transportation, it cut out a middleman essentially. So that was the last significant change I made to my workflow. But I don't know if it applied to anyone watching. Maybe like 2% that's at my level, maybe a little bigger.
Yeah, oh, that's good. So we've been going for a little while. Let's do the drawing real fast. For those of you that maybe tuned in late, the contest we're doing right here is coolest item you've sold. Drop it in the comments, and we're going to pick a random one for a consultation call with David. You can kind of pick his ear, pick his knowledge about either improving your bulk operation or maybe even starting a bulk operation. Or I'm sure he'll talk to you about any other topic you want to talk about too, real estate, anything else like that. So I realized a random number is probably not going to work for this because we have questions mixed in with the.
I'm thinking, Matthew, I'm thinking there are at least 50, like 50 out there. And, unfortunately, I noticed a few people commented really late, but I think 50 is good. And then maybe draw a random number and I'll kind of count down from the comments.
All right, let me grab a random number generator real fast.
1 through 50.
Random numerator generator. Let's see here. Max is 50. Let's hope it's not like 49.
Yeah.
Oh, 2.
2. All right.
2 is the random number generator.
All right. That'll be very easy. Okay. So let's see. The first person who commented is all right. Adam E wrote how to reserve diabetes. I think that's a item that they entered, for like the coolest.
And that's number 2.
That's number 1. And then number 2 is Robert
Adam
Lackey.
got all excited for a second.
No, Robert Lackey says, speaking of a cool item, haha. All right. So Facebook user, you're going to have to help me out with this. Facebook user at 2:08 p.m. wrote Julia Child's cookbook from 1966. Sold for $531. Got it for free. So infinite return. Do you know who that is?
Let me pull that out here. 108. Is it this one right here?
Facebook user.
All right. So is that one right
Yeah,
there? Is
yeah,
that the one you're talking about? Okay.
That's
So
the
if the person that left that comment is still on Facebook, comment your name in the comments there so we can get this out to you. Otherwise, we'll have to go to someone else on the list. For those of you that do not know about this, on Facebook, if you're watching on Facebook and not on YouTube, there's going to be a link in the description of this video, and you can click that. Oh, someone said me.
Yeah,
Facebook user, Doug.
Oh, is it Doug?
Let me
Oh,
write this
nice.
down here.
Yeah. So literally, it's Doug Belser. So he's the fellow who won the $20 off me in Miami.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
that's awesome. And honestly, like I know Doug and I, we had a brief conversation near the end of Avery's event, and I wanted to talk to him more. But this is serendipitous, truly.
How should Doug reach out to you? Is Instagram the best? Or for anyone else watching, if they want to reach out to you and chat a little bit, is Instagram the best platform to do that on?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And actually, I have Doug's Facebook, so I'm just gonna go ahead and shoot him a message.
And then you're at Dave Can Read on Instagram, right?
At Dave Can Read on Instagram. So if you guys, I don't put out a lot of content. I'm like still trying to figure out like sort of where I fit into all this. Like I wouldn't consider myself a guru by any means, and I'm not like out there trying to really spit out regular knowledge, but more so engage and connect with the community and kind of see what sort of opportunities are out there and maybe see if there are ways that we can collaborate and work together. And so find me, Dave Can Read, shoot me a message. Again, I post kind of sporadically and happy to have a conversation with you guys. But for Doug, I'm going to go ahead and get connected with him.
Nice.
All right.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. You've got a lot of experience there. And so thank you for doing that and answering all these questions to help get everyone started here. We're going to be doing these still weekly. This is episode 3. So next Thursday, I think we'll be able to push the time a little bit next Thursday to a little bit later in the day for some scheduling things with Caleb and I. I think we'll be a little later in the day, but we'll announce that. But it will be next Thursday, and we'll try and keep that time consistent in the future. But thanks, Dave, for joining us today, and thank you everyone else that came out for the live stream. And
cool. All right. Well, thanks for having me. And all right, have a good weekend, you guys.